Welcome back to Segmented Turning, Part 3. On the first one we cut the segments, the second part we glued the pieces together into rings, and the third one we're going to assemble and turn the vessel. Well, I kind of moved ahead a little bit. I have installed the first two rings on the base. I'm going to just glue one on today so you can kind of see how the job's done, but repeating it probably is not necessary. So the key is, we've made the rings and we need to get one side flat, so when I glue it on here that we have a nice tight joint. So the trick is to sand that flat. So what I'm going to do here is do that at the lathe, little sanding disc, and all I'm going to do is to flatten one side so that I can get a nice tight glue joint here. So let's turn the speed down across the center so their sides being done equally. And if you're concerned that it's not getting all the area done, pencil line all the way around. Looks good. So, I don't need this anymore. Now that it's sanded, I've mounted the project back on the lathe. We've sanded and flattened this side. So these two surfaces will glue together perfectly now, but I've got to get it centered somehow. Let me show you how I do it on shallow pieces and thin rings. I have here a life center system. This happens to be the Jet brand, but the one-way brand does the same thing. It has a thread on here that's 3/4 tin, and there's also an adapter which I can screw onto it that allows me to screw a faceplate or a chuck onto this thread. There's 1x8, 1¼ x 8, and 33 millimeters, so whatever size, we have them all. Well, there's the adapter. Here's what I'm going to screw on. This is one of my Talon chucks. I have a set of what they call jumbo jaws or coal jaws, depending on the brand. And I'm going to mount it here. For doing segmented work, this is a great accessory to have. So now that ought to work pretty well for aligning things. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this ring and center it here. It doesn't stand up in this hole very well, but it's good enough. And I've got screws placed so that when I tighten this down, the ring is going to be centered. Now I'm using the screws and not the rubber bumpers like on the outside here. There's one for each hole. Because when I put glue on here, and if it drips, it's not going to land on anything. The screws are turned a little bit below the surface of the wood. So when I put this in here, get my tool rest out of the way, and slide this down, that's going to line perfectly. Well, let me glue it on, and then let's talk some more about this. First thing I'm going to do is get some glue on it. I'm just going to set it down here where it's nice and flat. Add a little bit of my Tight Bond glue. Doesn't take a lot. And as I have always done, I spread it with my finger. The reason is I want it level as I can get it, and sometimes glue, when it gets older, develops little lumps, and those lumps will cause this not to lay flat. So what I want to do is get that spread around as best I can. Slide this up reasonably close, lock it down. Now I want to line it properly. A piece of paper towel here to eliminate any possible drips. I want to line this corner with the corner of the ring 2 rows down so that I have a perfect brick lathe. So now it's close. I'm going to wiggle a little bit here to spread the glue a little bit more, and I'm checking the alignment of this joint with the new joint. And I think that's good. little bit of pressure. And now we need to wait a few minutes for that glue to tack, because the next thing I'm going to do is turn this vessel. So we'll lock that down. Let me talk to you a little bit about some of the glue up things that I do. First of all, the base is solid, so the first ring can go on in any orientation. The second ring, when it goes on, I'd like to have in the center of this segment. You can change that later on for other kind of projects, but right now I measured the distance from this edge of this segment, and I marked a line in the middle. And when the second ring went on, that joint lined up with that mark. Now the third one, it's easy because I can line up with the first joint. If there was another ring, it would line up with the second joint, and so on. So to bricklay this and keep the joints perfectly in a line, it simply requires us to take the second ring and line it up with a mark, and from then on, being careful that we keep those square. On future projects, I'll show you some other things we can do, but right now, that'll get the job done. So that's glued up. I'm getting my paper towel under here for a little drip catcher in case I put too much glue on. And I always like to put extra glue. Now, I've talked to you about glue before, and I'm using Titebond Original on almost all of my projects. There's nothing wrong with using Titebond 2 because it will take a little longer to tack. And it's summertime where I live, and it's getting warm. And as it gets warm, glue tends to sit faster. And if you feel that you're limited in having enough time before it tacks, like I showed you in the rub joints in the last episode, you might want to try Titebond 2 to give yourself a little bit more working time. There is a Titebond Extended, and that much extra working time is not necessary for our kind of projects, although the glue works fine. But you'll have to wait. So now I've got this on here, and before I back any of this off, I'm going to go open the jaws just a little bit. Take the pressure off the tailstock. These jaws have been opened. I can now pull this back, and that ring is glued in place. Now I still want to wait a couple minutes before I start to turn. I don't need this anymore, so let's take this out. Set it aside. I'm going to do most of my turning with just a standard bowl gouge. Inside here, my cuts will go down to a certain point, but I'll have difficulty coming around across the bottom because of the shape of the bevel. So what I probably will end up using to finish off the inside would be a round nose scraper. Remember, when we glued up these rings, the outside edges are right on the drawing. So when this flat gets turned down to being round, and all these corners have gone away, this shape will be right on the outside. The inside will be turned down to give us the desired wall thickness. Remember, we added extra material on the inside simply to facilitate the glue up. And on next project, you'll find that I'll add extra material for mechanical support reasons also. So while this glue is setting, let me talk about where we go. Hollow vessels will be our next project. Not this one, but one very similar to it. Why? Because I'm going to build the bottom half of this on one face plate, and I'm going to build the top half on a second face plate. Clamp those two halves together, shape my exterior, and then, because they're not glued together, I can easily clean up the interior and then glue them together. So I'm going to show you a process of using two face plates, and again, the same device for aligning the rings that I used here. And I'm going to show you another device for aligning rings where I have plenty of clearance to get in and do the alignment. So this is where we're going next. Well, it's been about 2 minutes, 3 minutes, and I think I'm going to attempt to to start shaping this, even though the glue is not fully set. So I'm going to take fairly light cuts here, bring it all the way down, and remember, sorry, I didn't have that at hand, the shape of the bowl we're shooting for here. So it's nice to have that drawing at hand so I can kind of see where I'm going to be going. So let's move the tailstock out of the way, get my glasses on, get my tool rest at the proper height. Speed's down to 0. Now we can see that things are a little bit out of line, and that's okay, because that's what we're going to take care of right now. At this grit, I can take care of little imperfections in my turning. And I'm looking over the top edge, looking this way, seeing that floor come behind it. The floor is dark and the wood is light. Now there's a couple little spots right here that have not fully turned around. So I'm going to take them in just a little bit more. Yeah, I got it. Okay, back to 180. $320. Now, one of the reasons I sand before I even do the inside, it gives me a nice smooth surface on which I can rest my hand when I turn this wall down. If it starts getting a little wobbly and starts to vibrate, I can always stabilize this with my hand while I'm turning the inside. So I'm ready to go inside. Now, I'll use my bowl gouge for part of it, put my sandpaper away, but I'm also prepared to either go to a shallow fluted gouge if that's necessary, or even a round nose scraper, which is probably what I'll end up finishing at the inside because I want to cove out that bottom solid piece a little bit to give it a curve. So I have a round nose scraper, small piece. I don't have a handle on it, but it'll be fine. So now we're going to go inside. Now, since I'm turning inside, I can set that tool rest inside the bowl, giving me a chance to be really close to the work I'm working on the wood I'm working on. Glasses, drawing still here, I know where I'm going. Let's make sure that's out of the way. And now we're going to come down. As you can see, the inside is a little bit out of round, as we expected. So I'm going to come down square, but very light. Now I'll take the wall down a little bit more. Now, because I'm down to a place where coming around with the bowl gouge is going to be very difficult, I'll try a couple of cuts, and then I'm going to change over to the scraper, I believe. Yeah, that's working. But it's not going to give me a smooth shape around those scraper. I left a. Well, that's just was not smart at all. What I did was not even watch what I was doing and trying to talk at the same time. Most time I have accidents or catches is one or two times. When I start a cut like that, or at the end of the cut, when I think, oh, that's done, I start pulling out. Just got to be very cautious at the beginning and the end of the cut. What I did is tap the scraper against the rim of the bowl, and now I'm going to fix that. I'll just use a scraper because I got it. I've radiused it just a little bit. Now hear that high pitch sound? That's this bowl vibrating. This is where I put my hand on the outside for steady. Yeah, the scraper works really fine on maple. One nice thing about turning segmented, the grain is always running this direction because of the way we've laid the pieces out. So that means turning is really a lot of fun. Now I can see at the very top ring, there's 2 or 3 spots where the corners of the joints are still visible. It means I have a little bit more wood to turn away there. And I can tell my wall's getting thicker down here as I expected, because that's the last place I'm going to turn. So I'm going to finish the top edge, finish this ring, and then finish into the bottom. Right there, it's getting thick. That's where I know. Okay, that's what I want. Now I'll get my little, I left a little prominence, I think a word for it, at the bottom. This is where the thickness of the base originally was, and I've not turned that away. This allows me to see how much I'm taking off of the inside of that base. I now can tell I'm down about 3/16 of an inch. I know how thick this bottom piece was, so now I can round that off, take that away, and call this project completed. Let's see what it looks like. Well, all joint corners are gone. It's a little thick right in there still, so I'll take a little bit more off. And then fade it away to 0. Yeah, I like that. So I don't like sharp edges. I think I'll break that with the sandpaper when I get around to it, because it doesn't need that much to take off. I'm getting ready to reverse this and take it off the chuck, but generally what I end up doing when I'm working on a real project is I'll leave it in this stage right here. I will sand it inside and out. I'll add all the finish, build my coats of finish, then part it off and complete the base last as a separate activity. So I'm going to do a little sanding inside. We're going to call this done. And then I'm going to actually reduce this block I've glued it to. And we'll show you one way to take it off the chuck. My sandpaper. I'm still going to start with the same grits. And I'll do 400 because I've got it right here. So the piece is basically done, other than being able to get this taken off. So what I'm going to do first is this is a square block I've got to glue to, so I need to take some mass out of that and get those corners down. I can't put a parting tool in there. Go with my bowl gouge and just knock this down a little bit. Okay, that's not enough, but that'll do it to get started. Here's what I'm going to do. Clean the decks a little bit. Remember this over here in the tailstock? Well, we're going to move the project over there. Okay, that's centered, but now we're going to vacuum check this. So I'll screw my vacuum chuck in place. I bring this piece up against it. I know it's centered. So let's turn the vacuum on. I'm not locking the tailstock because the vacuum chuck will suck it down a little bit. I want to allow that to be sucked in. So I'm only using this for alignment purposes. Turn my vacuum on, closed my gauge, see how much vacuum I've actually got. I have a little gauge over here which gives me a good view. Not a lot. it's probably going to be okay. So let's take my parting tool, which I'll go get, and I'm going to start cutting on this between centers. Now that it's in place, I can put a little bit of pressure on it. Better. Well, there's our bowl. As I said before, I generally would have left it on the glue block until I had all the finish on. I could actually vacuum check it up this way and go back and sand some more inside if I needed to. There's another alternative. I could easily have grabbed the rim in my jumble jaws with the rubber, not with the screws, and turn this bottom away. But be cautious in using jumbo jaws, as it's not a great hold. Keep the tailstock up as long as possible. And recognize that most of these have printed someplace along this edge. Do not exceed 1,000 RPM. This is aluminum. It has some flex to it. And if we squeeze too hard and push in the wrong place, it could give away. So it's another option. There are several options, but this is the one I chose to do for our simple bowl. Well, it was just that, a simple bowl. And what we're going to do next time, as I have announced, is trying to use two face plates to accomplish a more complex project. So I'm going to show you how to use a two face plate technique, not repeat a lot of the same steps, but take you on to the next level. And I'm also going to show you how I have aligned the segments as we went along. So Stay tuned for video number 4 in our series, and keep sending us your comments and your subscriptions. We appreciate it. It helps us to continue to produce the videos the way I think you would like to see them. Thanks for watching. See you in the next part.